All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Quill and Query podcast. My name is Brandon Hall. As always, I'm joined today by my wonderful co-host Ash. Ash, how are you doing today?
I am unseasonably hot, Brandon. I think you are feeling the same way.
I
It's
am,
just, yeah,
yeah,
it's
I am
warm.
exactly the same. I've made it very clear. I feel like on many episodes that I'm a creature of the cold. So these are not my seasons. But we have a special guest today, so I'm curious to hear her thoughts on the weather. Nika, why don't you let us know what it's like in your neck of the woods today?
I'm in Chicago, and it's not as warm as it was yesterday, where it got quite hot in the middle of the day, up to 68, 72, something like that. But it was
Mhm.
cold enough at 48 when I left the house, or like the townhouse, at it's important to be specific about these things. At 9 a.m. that I got like much too cold.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's that season where you like carry a jacket around, but sometimes don't need it and sometimes do. It's like, yeah, especially up there, I'm sure.
Well, I made you start with the weather, but also go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, I'm really thrilled to meet you. I've looked up your books a little bit, and I'm excited to hear more about that, including your poetry.
Mhm.
You had a poetry anthology that looked interesting. I
Yeah.
almost was like buying the stuff like on Friday or something in advance of the interview, and I was like, it's not going to arrive on time. Like, you really don't have money. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a I'm yeah, I'm a like a I'm an author for you hit the nail on the head with that like graphic. That's no, I feel like I'm always trying to explain to people what I am, but yeah, I've written a couple books over the past 3 years, especially, but I've been identifying as a writer for a really long time, like over 20 years. And so it's really only over the past year that I've published in print. And so the little series that I published last year was a zine series. It was like because I'd made some zines before, and so I was thinking about self publishing as a technology, and so I and was making these little books that were very zine like in their content, but they were going into KDP and Ingram Spark and all of that. So the first one is Replicate This. It's from February 2025, and it's a postmodern scientific essay. I had been in a doctoral program before the pandemic, so it's just like a big satire of that genre, almost like literary fiction, to the extent that it's like riffing on David Foster Wallace's use of footnotes and stuff like that, but very kind of straightforward in its message, which is just like almost like a blog, but like printed in a book. And then the second one was Mole, which I don't know, was more like where I wanted my kind of content and material to be. So that I published a couple months later. And the third project took much longer than the other two and was really rewarding. It's Alphabet or AI Play. Although it was initially developed as Google Play, it's something I found when I was inside of the Google Play interface for self-publishing, was that there was like the opportunity to code robots, the AI robots talking to each other, but um, almost like a play, but it was with fake people. So I was like, I could just write an entire play and code robots talking to each other, though I could never bring myself to do that. So I placed um, the robot personas as characters in a script that I found real voice actors to perform in. And so that published as an audiobook, a CD. There's like some vinyl efforts also, although that hasn't been printed, or there's not like a stable shelf product right now. And it's also, the script is a book, like a published book, and I'm hoping to make that into an animation. So it's an ongoing project.
Oh, so cool. Especially the animation component. I don't think we've had anyone who's talked about making their works. It's like, it's very, it's, what is it? Multi-genre almost, like tactile versus the audio. That's so cool. So cool to hear about. All right. You want me to take the next question, Brandon?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Okay,
my doc was loading for me.
No, it's okay. It's always Tuesdays are always like, we love doing this. We love having people on, but like right after work, we're all like shell-shocked a little bit. So it sounds like you have your hands busy with a lot of different stuff, but talk to us about the books, the authors, etc., that have had the biggest influence on your writing career. You mentioned doctorate programs, so yeah, just go into depth about that if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I grew up as a reader. My mom is a big reader, and she's from a family that reads a lot. So she read me stories every night when I was going to sleep. So really with children's fiction, I was kind of spending every weekend at the Borders, and like they had a kid section in the basement, and I was like reading absolutely everything that they had in the space. So back then it was, I was a big fan of, do you know the Alana novels by Tamara Pierce?
I'm not
off the
familiar.
top of my head, no.
It might be very specific because she's an Illinois person, I think. So maybe I found her that way. But I read Roald Dahl, I read Harry Potter, I read all of the classics, and then I started reading my mom's books because she and my dad were working, so I would go to my mom's bookshelf primarily because my dad would like talk about what she was reading sometimes. And so she wouldn't let me read certain things. Like she would read me passages from J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye where it's like Holden, the guy talking to his kid sister. But then she's like, you can't read the other stuff. It's like for adults it's inappropriate. And I was like, I have to know. So when she wasn't home, I was like, what?
That's a surefire way to get any kid to just like go and do it behind somebody's backs is tell them they can't read it or can't do the thing. Yeah,
I can't imagine getting pieces of a story read to me. It's almost like just don't read it to me at all yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not how I remember processing it. But that's what it was. It was like there's a little girl dropped in with this character, and like she disappears throughout the rest of the novel. And so, what could the novel possibly be about? Yeah, and why am I not allowed to know? But in terms of people I found them later. Like, I'm not really a fan of J.K. Rowling because, even the title Harry Potter, it was difficult for me to process it when I was a child. but it has like all of these like lurid connotations, and people have critiqued what's inside of the book to death. But I like the fast moving plot. So I think that was probably a big influence on me as a 20-something, in that a lot of the people I knew in New York City who were aspiring journalists or novelists had really like a lot of interest in like difficult literature, and I was like, it just has to be fun. You have to want to move through it because otherwise, like, you're nowhere in relation to Harry Potter, and you have to be in relation to Harry Potter right now, like you do.
Yeah.
Well, you told us a little bit about your history with writing. Sounds like it goes back a long time, even if your published works are more recent. So I'm very curious, especially with, I feel like you kind of fit in a different box, not to put you in a box, but just to say, than a lot of previous authors we've had on the show. So I'm curious to hear what is your writing process like? What's a typical day of writing look like for you?
Oh, yeah. This is where I feel like probably an imposter or something, because I mean, there's a definitely model for how to be a professional writer. And that's, you know, everyone goes away for about 4 hours a day, and it's only you and like a blank page, and it's far away from technology. And I have never achieved that. I've been writing a lot online, especially, you know, kind of early in my career as an adult. I was blogging. I had a job that allowed me to blog. Gary Steingart, this you know, Soviet American writer, he's written Super Sad True Love Story and some other stuff. He's also writing these like big and sort of plot driven books that are really appealing for Russophone speakers, because that he's really close to that. You know, I heard his story about when I was still in college. I heard his story about how he was working at a nonprofit job, and he was just not doing any of his assigned tasks. He was sitting at his closed office door, and he would just actually spend 4 hours writing his book. and then he left the job because he had published like a critically acclaimed bestseller. And you know, I couldn't really swing that. So I was just trying to make the work that I had to do as close to where I wanted my writing to be. So I kind of walked. It's more complicated than that. First I was in college to like kind of subsidize my expenses. First I was a waitress, and then I met Andrea Grant, who is a comic book artist, a writer, and a model. So I was kind of going on consignment to place her comic books, Minx, in comic book stores. And then she was hired as managing editor for this fashion website. And I helped launch their editorial, not through them officially, but because I was working with her. And then I asked her if she could get me a contract with them when I was graduating. And they got me a marketing contract, which was not where I thought I wanted to be. That was all social media. That was all search engine optimization. That was link building. But I was like, honestly, the only way to really market this website is to be publishing writing that people want to read. And I think I am qualified to do that. So I was really just like kind of inserted myself there as a writer. And that has really shaped what kind of writing I do on a daily basis, because although I write a lot by hand, I work on a typewriter, I work on a private like Linux computer, and I work on kind of an Apple, like sort of what I'm on now, which I consider like a more corporate environment. I'm sort of always writing as communication rather than like writing to like get the hours in.
How do you organize from so many different like systems, I guess, handwriting versus typewriting versus on multiple computers? Do you have a way to do that, or is that kind of half the fun, is just kind of seeing where things flow to and flow from?
It gets like tighter and tighter as I go through it. So I think at first it was like, that's over here and that's over there, and like they're never gonna meet. Like that's really how it felt when I was working at the fashion website. It's like my real writing is over there and the fashion writing is over here, and I'm just lost in the middle, you know? But like I just like drawing these concentric circles. And so I think I once heard a friend describing her. She's like, I have an Instagram, a Twitter, and a Facebook account, and they're all buckets. And like, you know, it's like, does this go in the Instagram bucket? Does this? And so it's sort of it has that kind of logic.
Yeah. So does this mean that you're like writing everywhere on the go at home, like when you're traveling? Is this, or do you have like that set time period? I know you mentioned the example of like sitting there for 4 hours straight. Or are you someone who just kind of like, whenever the inspiration hits, whatever the closest medium to write is?
Yeah, I think so. I have not. Yeah, I've had the experience. There was like a phase I went through where it was like, I need to write. I would feel like I need to write. And then just like putting in the password to my computer felt like I was like, I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I just, that was, so it was like there is like the materials do have to be there or it doesn't work. But yeah, I used to, especially when I was living in Berlin and New York and California, having grown up in Chicago, and so I was really always out before the pandemic, and I would carry a big notebook and pen with me, and I would take myself out on dates to coffee shops and stuff all the time, and just like sit there and write whatever I wanted. Mostly that was journaling. I loved journaling, but. And then when I was, and then there would be work time where I was on the computer. In grad school, it became like I had to write papers for professors as instead of blogging. That required me to combine the journaling with the online stuff more in a more focused way than I had when I was purely feeling like a professional already.
Nice.
I'm going to jump to a little bit of a different question here and ask, what is your favorite part and least favorite part of the creative process and the process of writing? Because we talked a little bit about tools you use in your process. So I'm curious, what do you look forward to? What do you like? And what parts do you maybe not like so much?
Well, yeah, right now I'm finishing a novella and I'm not sure I like it.
All right, tell us more about that.
I don't know. It's like I'm rereading it to correct the draft before I continue, and it feels like okay. Yeah, I don't know. That's actually I'm really curious whether you've had that experience also. Well, because you both write fantasy, so it's actually such an exciting form of writing because like you really want to know where the story is going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think we both are very similar in the way that we like to know, like, we're not restricted by the structure or the outline, let's say, of like what we've built. They're just more of like our guidelines and parameters, but we're both we need to know where we're going, or at least I have learned that in the last couple of years, because if I don't, I kind of just like sit there and go, what the hell am I doing? And I don't, sometimes the characters lead me into a different, plot point, and then I have to scrap whatever I've written. But there have been so many times where I've read and had to scrap entire chapters or chunks of a project simply because I reread it and I'm like, this just doesn't, there's no way to verbalize it, but something just doesn't sit right in my gut, it just doesn't either feel like me writing or it doesn't feel like what the character would do, etc. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, I think there have been times where it's like the structure's there, but sometimes it just doesn't quite work, so you have to kind of start back at square one.
Yeah, so you've plotted, so you plot in advance.
Yeah. Some people don't do that though. Some people are purely we've had some folks on here that are just like, no, I kind of just fly by the seat of my pants and see where it takes us. So I didn't mean to speak for you, Brandon, but
no, I'm definitely the same way. I like to know at least the major beats and the ending, but I try not to define things too much to leave room for discovery. Otherwise, as my favorite author says, I kind of lose all interest in writing it if I know all the details. But yeah, I can also relate to reading your own creation and being like, I don't know if I like this. Like sometimes I'll look at the chapters I've written and I'll be like, these are really good, and then other times I'll go back to the same chapters and kind of feel the opposite, and I don't really know why, to be honest. It's just it almost seems like it's dependent on my mood for the day, but I think in those scenarios it's always helpful to get extra eyes on it, because then you're kind of removed from it and you can see, is there any truth to me being really proud of this, or me maybe the more critical side that I'm looking at it with. So That's kind of how I deal with that. Issue of looking at my own work and not really knowing how I feel about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's like, am I tricking myself into saying this is bad, or is it actually not great? I need someone else to take a look. What about you? Do you how do you handle that when you're sitting there? You were just mentioning it, so curious what you do in those situations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, well, what I've been doing with this particular draft is I've been drawing on it, sort of the same way that I used to journal, just with like watercolor and brush. So just coloring the page and feeling like that will um, at least turn the draft into something I really want to look at, even if I'm not wanting to zero in on the words, and that'll make me feel more comfortable with like wanting to complete the project in general, because I've already like made this step that has like its own value. Yeah.
Can I know you can totally refuse to answer this if it's top secret, but what is this novella you're writing? Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or is it kind of under wraps right now while you're trying to decide how you feel about it?
No, I'm definitely like it's not top secret. I've already been talking about it, and in fact, invited. Yeah, and it's what's cool about it is I've invited contributions from other people, so it's going to be published with a few other pieces. I've received almost all of them. Like a short story that I read before I started writing it, a really funny comic vignette by Alexis Lachey Smith, and poetry by Shannon Pogden, who is a kind of graduate student in social work that I know from a social media project, and hopefully also an essay by someone else. And so those are all like assorted. So those are all assorted, and they're going to be published with the novella, which is the biggest piece. And it is. I began it during the. Do you know the novella Spring Garden project?
Not familiar with that either.
See,
no.
we're so you are so unique in that we exist very much in this kind of like fantasy realm. So this is, you will probably say a few more names in the future, and we will probably not know them, which is cool. We get to learn.
No, this is definitely fantasy adjacent. Well, because novella Spring, you know NaNoWriMo and how it got canceled last year.
Yeah.
Well, then and this is sort of, I'm saying this. I'm not really ready to print this following sentence, but so when NaNoWriMo shut down, some of the people who were exiled from the community began a project on Discord called Novella Spring Garden. And it was basically just to publish a novella over the course of the spring, and they were gonna just write it. Sorry, and they were gonna publish it in August last year, but like me, many people wanted a deadline extension. So in fact, it's publishing in April, but I'm not probably not publishing with them. I'm probably doing more of like reading everything they've written and then publishing my thing like separately, because it's a plot about psychiatrists and social workers and psychologists. So I've been in therapy since I was probably 15 years old, and as a writer then already. And so there's this this is far from fantasy. There's this sociological concept of participant observation, which is like, which is, kind of going into a group and seeing what they're doing, and then writing up almost like a fictionalized narrative about it. Those are often fictionalized, without any kind of literary scaffolding or buttressing for that kind of work, imaginative labor. And so I've been thinking about therapy as like a form of participant observation for myself. Like, what is it like that was really interesting to me as a teenager. Like, what is it like to be someone who like invites people into this like closed room, and they tell you like their deepest, darkest, whatever, and then you go home with that. And like, you know, you're not really supposed to. I would want to write it up. I mean, they do write it as, you know, like peer-reviewed literature, and it's often really mean. That's the thing. But like, I would want to write it as like beautiful fiction, and that doesn't happen. So I mean, there are exceptions, but it's rare. And so yeah, like the text is sort of about that. I'm calling it participant observation, but it's like fiction of therapists specifically. And so why I'm not publishing it with Novella Spring Garden, not only because like the original moderation issues on the forum like are actually the trigger that got me into therapy. I was sexually harassed when I was in junior high. Sorry, trigger content, blah blah blah, but not good content. But yeah, and then also because and there is a lot of what people who are writing there are publishing as like erotic fiction, and so I am like kind of distancing myself from that, but like I do want to be able to incorporate my observations about their work from a more scholarly perspective somehow within that like fiction publication.
Got it. Yeah, that's and we will certainly keep an eye out when you choose to publish, but that's really fascinating to take like the line of what other people have been doing and then decide that that's not what you want to do while still being supportive. I think we all experience that a lot. But yeah, that's really cool to think about other people's experiences and how they take that and turn it into something more literary, especially like psychologists or sociologists or anyone like that. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about anything like that. So very cool. All right, I will take the next question. Okay. We'll step away from the kind of writing process. Can you talk to us about your experience publishing your e-zine? It's like it's an official trilogy, right? Or is it just a part of a larger project?
No, it's both. Okay. Wait, what's the first part of your question?
So what was it like, what was your experience like publishing it? Because I think, I see, signs or zines a lot of places, especially at local markets and things like that. But in an e-version of that is so, at least to me, very unique. So what was it like publishing those works?
Oh, it was really fun. I felt like a hacker because I was going, do you feel that way when you're self-publishing stuff? Because it's like going into those retailers like Amazon and gosh, I'm blanking on Apple, all of them, and Ingram Spark, and like I tried to publish in all of them, like in audio distribution, everything. But it's like it wasn't fitting, like the files weren't fitting based on how I wrote. So it took a million. I had many iterations of it. I have been, so that's the question is like, they are self-published e-zines or zines. So, I mean, all these zines are always self-published, and there are a lot of people who publish zines online for digital download as single-page PDFs that one is then like printing and folding together. And so putting that into a print on demand, I think, is a technical labor that's not really in the community yet. I had previously published a more traditional booklet style zine. Like in my 20s after college, that I got printed at a print shop and then stapled together. I figured out how to lay it out as a booklet. That was the fun of it back then. That had a lot of excerpts from my journals and notebooks. So I was collaging pieces together of writing that I just thought was like, it's fine. Like, let's just see what this looks like when it's printed rather than handwritten. And then I went to the Zine Pavilion at the American Library Association in 2023 with this really large scientific poster board style zine. So I got Minuteman Press to fold a scientific poster board differently than they normally do. So there was a spine and then a cover, and then it opened.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then I printed a story like right across the front and decorated the outside. Nobody bought it. It would have been really difficult to mail, and I didn't have a price. Yeah, somebody is like, could you buy this for your library in Kansas?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know how much I need to ask for it or how much the shipping would be.
Yeah,
but yeah.
No kidding.
So I still have that. So it's all sort of been art, I would say.
Yeah. What made you want to do the e-zine versus, so you moved away from the physical in this regard, at least with this collection. So why were you drawn to that more than a different format?
Reproducibility. I had been doing them I started doing them by hand last winter, but I was like, nobody is going to be able to find them this way, and so I have to create ones that are going to have the same sort of like values for readers that the handmade ones have, but accessible for anyone, and at fairly affordable prices. Like if I'm selling like a one-of-a-kind zine that I've handmade and I'm never gonna see it again, like I don't know how much to ask for that. Like that's definitely like something that's just like like a question that's like out of frame for me completely. So something that I can put online and then it's printed, that at least I can price.
Sure, that makes sense. The last part of this question is, do you have any advice to those who are kind of exploring these different unique formats that aren't, as like you were saying, it's kind of hard to put up on these platforms? Do you have any, and it's okay if you don't, but those who are curious or interested to try, any initial thoughts on pitfalls or things to avoid, or who to avoid in this regard in terms of like Kindle and all that?
Well, I think the applications you're using are really important for self-publishing. So I've used the very basic ones like Kindle Direct Press, the Kindle Create, and I work in Calibre and Pages and stuff like that. I don't have a copy of Vellum. I would like a copy of Vellum. So I guess I would recommend either like committing to there's basically two ways of going. One is really open source, like Scribus and like that and so it's really close to social media, because social media is the kind of thing where like if you're publishing something, if you're posting something on Instagram, it has to go in a square. And so if you're taking a photo in a rectangle off of that's not in a Polaroid and then putting it on Instagram, you're going to have to crop it. So there is like kind of a step there that is where the hacking sort of comes in, and it might not feel good because you might like the rectangular image. And so I think that with self-publishing, the two versions are like really go glossy and commercial, like with a Vellum subscription and like paying for whatever like you think you would need in order to maybe buy a font or something like that, or go for Scribus and make your own fonts and stuff like that, and choose that as early as you want or can, like while you're making the content as well, because that's where things stop feeling seamless sometimes, is if they're not really designed for the platform that they're on.
No, that's good advice. It's almost like the analogy you used, your friend said earlier, like your bucket, like choose your bucket early on so that you can make sure. Yeah, it's crazy how each platform regardless has its own way of doing. I mean, I know why, but at a certain point it's just exhausting sometimes. You're like there are way too many ways to do this and I don't have enough time.
Ash, I'm gonna skip a couple of the ones that you did. I want to let you
Sure.
tackle those ones. But while we're on the topic of publishing, I do want to ask, having published three of these zines, are there any lessons that you've taken kind of from one to the next, and then maybe from your most recent one that you plan to apply to whether it's the novella or the next thing you publish? Just any major lessons you learned along the way, or wisdom you want to impart to anyone seeking a similar publishing path?
Um, yeah, that's such a good question. Well, could you tell me what about your experiences with that, with like what you've learned as authors?
Yeah, so I think at least for speaking for myself with publishing the Blades for Hire anthology, it's probably very different to publishing the zines. The way I did it is go through KDP, so Kindle Direct, and from there it was just kind of the process of formatting all the writing, all the submissions that we got, and making sure it fit the guidelines. And that was definitely a learning process. I learned a lot about formatting there, especially from our friend Bex. Taught me a lot that I did
The
not know.
whiz.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's great at formatting. So I would say a lot of the things that I learned are more on kind of that technical side of things, like how to make sure your cover is right the first time instead of having to tweak the size and go back to the artist a million times. And then same thing with formatting the actual text. It's difficult to, I guess, share that advice with people until they're like actually in the KDP portal and they're like putting their books in there. So it's hard to kind of put it out there in a broad context, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I actually don't have any experience on the back end. I've only been printed or published through small presses and I have offered assistance, but there are people like Bex and Brandon who are much more adept at than I am. Um but it's been interesting to hear because it's been like a such a group effort each time, even if it's just like, hey guys, we're gonna send this out. If the formatting looks weird on like your phone versus your Kindle versus whatever, and then everyone kind of just reports back, or someone catching a. Was it you, Brandon, who caught that it was like a sword from Lord of the Rings that had been added into the cover on accident?
that that was
Like,
he actually commented a few minutes ago, just
oh, did he?
in our chat. Yeah, that was Michael Malwassel, one of our
Oh,
previous
funny.
guests. He caught that the stock photo was not licensed properly, so
Yeah,
great catch for him. That saved us a great deal of copyright and probably
yeah.
negative reviews because of that, because I didn't recognize the sword when they put it on the cover. So
Me
um,
neither. Me
yeah,
neither.
and also just no fault of the artist. It was
Mm-mm.
improperly uploaded to a stock photo site, unfortunately. So yeah, do your due diligence with that as well. If for anyone
Yeah,
listening, just verify that the stock photos are coming from a good site that
good
does their
source.
yeah, it does their
Yeah.
homework.
But I think that's what I've gleaned from someone not having such a back end background, rather, is just like it is actually so much more of a communal process, or it can be, and just knowing that there are people out there that are willing to help format or give advice or guide you in the right do this versus that, like if you're wanting this platform versus that platform, the wealth of knowledge compiled by a lot of people is something that I've learned. And so if I do it on my own or if I help with this next anthology, there's there are people to help. So that's my answer.
Yeah, so I guess that's actually, thank you for sharing that, because I think that's like helping me like acknowledge that
Mm.
it's so lonely. Like everyone
Mm.
says writing is lonely, but then it's like when you're self-publishing, like that's even lonelier because we're in a culture that talks about that teaches us to expect like agents and editors and all of this stuff.
Mm.
Of course, in like 2026, like if someone it's really cool if like it's really good to be a writer who can also follow like a their own grammar proofread. Like there's nothing detracts from the quality of one's work in that. Um, however, like, literature and books are not like the center of um, our attention as a society when, there's everything that's happening on television and stuff like that. So I think like being prepared for how lonely it is advice I would absolutely give someone in that, like, like it can feel like really, you may not have like people to give you feedback, and maybe you shouldn't ask for feedback sometimes, and like you should just like make that choice, like if you want, but then like don't um prevent yourself from reaching out if you need to. So I think that would be my advice.
That's good advice. How do you, if you're okay with sharing, how do you work through that loneliness when it does hit? Is there like a process for you that you take when you realize you're kind of becoming too isolated in the process, or do you find that that's actually beneficial for you to kind of be insulated from outside influence?
Um, well, I think the way that I have managed like working through the different phases over time has been by setting goals, and then um, find it like just because I think, other writers, I think about other writers, and so I'm just like, it's almost annoying to me, but like I have to do it because there's gonna be someone else is doing it. So like, and if I want to, like, I should do it too. So there were times where I was like, I'm just gonna, write 500 words I'm going to write 500 words a day on my computer, instead of just journaling by hand, because I need to start like publishing in this like more serious way, I guess. And so I did that. And I wasn't really talking about my writing process with any of my friends, although a lot of them were writers. So I'm not sure why. And so there were different reasons probably why we weren't talking about that stuff specifically. So yeah, and so um, at, right now I am really lucky in that I have like this amazing ensemble of 21 actors who starred in Alphabet Play, AI Play. And they have social media accounts to follow, and like voices I can listen to in like revisiting the work myself. So, and like ways that when I'm thinking about promotions for that project, like ways that I can try to bring them into more performance sort of for me, right? Because like I wanna like enjoy more of it myself. So I think that, yeah, finding community, even if it's, with performers, voice artists, rather than agents, editors, designers, distributors. Although I would love to work with distributors, I don't know. I'm also still friendly with Andrea Grant. We're working on we're working on publishing her memoir Bleach quite soon. She wrote a memoir, and so I connect with her around stuff. So I mean, you do know this because you chat. But yeah, having a friend who's also a writer that you can at least feel like you have a buddy system on is a lifeline.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so my next question, we're going to pivot a little bit again. Just from learning a little bit about you, how has your interdisciplinary scholarship changed how you approach writing, and how you consume literature today? Because I feel like you wear so many hats, and it's very impressive. How does that influence your writing?
Well, I'm so happy that you asked, because it's really like you're fan. It is like in the direction of fantasy. When I talked about like sociology and anthropology and participant observation and like thinking about where writers get their materials, like fantasy writers are also basing their story worlds in like everyday observation or history that they've read or family narratives, stuff like that, and then building things out, creating around that. So I think going into academia where I could just like focus a lot on how like the most authorized writers, because a lot of people think about scientists, so these days it's fashionable to think about scientists as writers, ever since this guy Bruno Latour published a book called Laboratory Life that described scientists at a particle accelerator lab whose main task was writing up the results. So he was like, they're inscribers, like what they're doing is publishing. So it was like going there where people were getting like paid the most money, doing the most like important kind of writing, and just like seeing where they were, like what was true and what was rewarded, and what the difference was between that, comparing that to the literary field where there's much more like much more emphasis on humanist values in storytelling or presentation, as opposed to like, we have a shiny machine. It's like, yeah,
it's expensive.
Yeah, we have character development. Like those are two different poles almost. And so, I think I've been thinking a lot about like, so what do I need to write to make magic happen in real life? And so like, what kind of magic is possible in real life? Because I love reading it, but it's also like, I'd love magic to happen IRL. And so, I don't know if that will take my work in the direction of like writing more magic storytelling, doing like more magic, like fantasy type storytelling, or not. In the meantime, it has been though, like the priority has been on like, finding out how to spellcast, sort of make writing that will like have often it's like having a great effect on readers, like something that will, or something that'll make them happy, something that'll make them think, something that'll make them puzzle, like whatever the case may be. That's what literature always does. It's like there for the reader to be impacted by. And then it's like, okay, and so a person is impacted, and what happens? Like, what happens? Yeah, like, what happens from that? How do I continue weaving that together so that there's like better and better outcomes?
Interesting. Better and better outcomes. What would that look like? Is that just like in general, or like do you have an envision of what like a better outcome looks like, or is that dependent on the person who reads? And that's kind of also their own magic of like how they take it, right? Depending on what you write.
Yeah. Well, just to give you a very concrete example, I believe in somatics. So that's commonly used in meditation and therapy, which is just that. You can meditate your way into lowering your heart rate, for example. That's empirically been shown, but like, I'm not saying I'm trying to biohack readers, but like I am focusing on my own like, yeah, okay, so I can lower my heart rate. Like, can I make a wound heal faster, but by the same kind of meditative process? And so if I'm working on myself that way, then that translates into whatever kind of storytelling that I'm going to be doing. And so the better outcomes, I think that's where it's individual and personal, like whatever that would be for people. There are some people who need liberty because they're behind bars. There are other people who need better access to food. There's all sorts of, so I mean that the tradition of like recipes and novels is also a really interesting one. Like there's Toni Morrison, there's Miriam's Kitchen. There are people who like drop in recipes into what they're writing, and so that's like another way of like just grounding the reader in what in how like you could be reading a book, but like you're also on the ground and like you deserve to have both.
Yeah, that's really lovely and interesting to think about.
Yeah, I never really looked at it that way, but you're giving me a lot of new, interesting perspectives on things, so I appreciate it, even if I don't have a ton of follow-up thoughts to share on it.
I'm gonna go after this and journal for the first time in a while, because it's just interesting to get such a different perspective, because we love everyone that we bring on here, but we often, get the same kind of feedback, or at least similar answers to questions. So this has been really, so far, and it will be the whole time, thought-provoking. So yeah, something to noodle on for sure.
Well, I'm jumping ahead here just to see which questions I've not already asked. So let's see. Oh, this one's a fun one. So it's, again, a little bit different from. We keep pivoting topics, but bear with me here. But we like to ask everybody the best and worst writing advice you've ever received, and I have a feeling you'll have another unique answer to this question. So I'm interested to hear what it is for you.
Oh no. Yeah, that's. I wish I had a good answer to that. So the best and worst writing advice I've ever received. Yeah, like actually the worst writing advice I've ever received was, professors telling me that, professor, professors telling me that the writing had to be legible or something like that. I mean, I know that that's like in general, like we do, but like actually I'm from an art background. So sometimes like the idea of writing something that's indecipherable from the outside, but then like makes a really pretty picture on the page, like that's really appealing to me. So I think that that's a tricky one, because of course, like if you're trying to if you want to be part of a community, or you want your writing to, connect with community, then it should be speaking to someone. I think the best writing advice I have, there's a really good book, writing down the bones, or something like that. It has a little bit of a creepy title. It's from the 90s. It's a writing advice book. It's her name is Natalie Goldberg, or something like that. I think it's Writing Down the Bones, and she had this idea of keeping a writer's notebook. And I had a teacher at the School of Theatre Institute of Chicago who also recommended keeping a writer's notebook. It's just like a notebook that one would carry around with them, and then write notes or journal or whatever you want to do in it, collages, stuff like that. But Natalie Goldberg had been keeping these writing notebooks, and she eventually let her neighbor read some of them after she was a published author. And the neighbor was like, wow. Some of that was so bad. Like, you could write that badly. Like, anyone could be a writer. But, like, she says it sort of differently. She says it like it really inspired the person. That, like, the writing could be really bad, and then it would still be, like, worth something to the reader in that context. So, yeah, I would say, like, total self-forgiveness with writing, because it's like, always turn it into always find a way to see it from the perspective of praise.
Yeah,
that's really good advice.
That is an interesting perspective. I've kind of had a similar thought before, where I've read something that has been published and been like, well, if that can get out there, then it's so yeah, I can relate.
No, I agree. It's interesting, especially with the rise of self-publishing, things that get popular. We've talked about this before, and you read it and you're like, why is this so popular? But then, to some people, it's the best thing that they've ever read. And that in of itself is beautiful. But I also like the notebook idea. I've been carrying one around for the last 10 years. And the crap in there. I say crap lovingly, of course, but it is, it's like things I wrote 8-9 years ago. I'm just like, oh girl, okay. But it's a cool snapshot into what I was thinking about then versus now, and how my note taking has changed too. So yeah, I love that is actually really good advice. Writers should always carry a little notebook. And I don't just mean like notes app either. I mean like, a physical notebook for sure.
Yeah, it could help. Yeah, I also have some stuff. Yeah, at one point I had a disappearing app where when I was typing, if I stopped typing for too long, it would erase everything I'd written.
Interesting. That would
sounds
stress me out. But maybe I need
sounds
that.
interesting and anxiety-inducing at the same time.
Yeah. Exposure therapy for someone with high anxiety, for sure. Right. I just don't know. But it's okay. To the wind. You want me to go next?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you to, because I spilled my drink over here, so I need to...
No!
I'll be right back, guys.
Okay, sounds good. Do you want us to pause? We can pause.
No, we're good. I'll just... If you take over, I'll be good. Okay. It'll only take me a second.
Okay. So, all right, we're going to pivot again to get a little bit more broad. So you've worked in a variety of genres. You enjoy a variety of genres. So how do you personally define genre fiction versus literary fiction? Because it's kind of come up a little bit already in this episode. And then I'll get to like the second half of the question. But how would you define it as an artist?
Thanks. Yeah. As somebody from like the former Soviet Union, like in the United States, I just have to say, like, there's not like a meaningful difference.
Sure.
I mean, there is obviously, like, from the perspective of like the writer who has to like fill in the BSAT categories and like, find people who are working in the same, like walking on the same street, so to speak. But, yeah, like literary fiction is a publishing category, that, is used to market a certain kind of value to readers. And genre fiction is kind of often like castigated for being like commercial in the, like, from the literary fiction side of things. So mystery, I mean, so I would say that there are different narrative expectations that a reader would bring to like literary fiction versus romance versus mystery versus fantasy versus sci-fi. Am I missing any really important genres right now that should be in here?
I think you hit on all the major
we hit the major ones, yeah.
Yeah. So, like it would be unusual to find aliens in a romance novel, and then if a literary fiction writer had aliens in their storytelling, then the reviewers would say like shades of sci-fi, like something like that.
Sure.
That's it. Yeah, a lot of people say that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the first work of science fiction. It's also, I think, the first zombie novel. So a lot of what gets written, so like a lot of people who are writing zombie novels after Mary Shelley might be like kind of like more or less like aware of how they're influenced by her. And so that's kind of where that term genre fiction like comes, like kind of gets solidified. On the other hand, Octavia Butler is writing a sci-fi that is definitely part of the same lineage tradition as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and she has like, perhaps more cred than a normal like literary fiction writer. When I think about Tana French and like those detective novels, I've read some of them. I like them. I would also say that they're like marketing to a literary genre. They're saying to a literary fiction audience, like, here's like some storytelling for once from us. But like rest assured it has like a check mark of approval. And that's where I'm like, check mark of approval. Like, no.
Yeah. I think you said it best in terms of like checking the boxes. Like these must, in order to be, at least in the marketplace, they have to hit these bars, or they have to include this, or if it I don't know, crosses genres, they have to, the blurb has to be written a certain way or talked about a certain way so that it doesn't scare away maybe the literary folks, but also entices the genre folks. So it is interesting. It is definitely about a good chunk of it marketing too. And I think a lot of people can sometimes be like intimidated by literary fiction depending on like what the topic is or who the author is. So I think it's a really interesting, when you put it in the, when you were typing about what you wanted to talk about, I thought it was really interesting that you kind of mentioned that, because I just never really thought about it. And also coming from, so many years in school too, after a while you're like, I don't want to read like highbrow literary stuff anymore. I want to, I don't know, just be entertained, right? Um, so I think that's where like I'm leading into the next part of this question is, do you think that the public, considering the rise of social media kind of groups like Book Talk, or easier to consume genres like romantasy, and I say that very loosely with a love in my heart from romantasy, are moving away from like literary fiction in general, like too far away? And do you think it's possible to merge the two together in like kind of new fun ways? I know that was a lot, but
Yeah, I would never ever put the, like, kind of blame or like kind of problematize what readers and the public are doing, in terms of like publishing trends. Yeah, I, I personally don't know that there's that much meaningful literary fiction that's being published. I mean, when I say published, that's extremely rude of me to myself, and like also to a certain extent to you, because like I do think I'm publishing. I think I don't have any recognition from my field in that like literary fiction sense. So yeah, I say that like about rudeness in terms of like, I don't think that that's like a mischaracterization of what's happening from the big publishing perspective. So there's the big five big publishers, and so I am slightly uninformed about like how their influence on the genre trends is being received. Like, you know that better than I do. What I know in terms of literary fiction is that they are like choking the creativity out, basically.
really,
Yeah. And that's structural. To a certain extent, that's because Bartelsmann, a German publishing house with what are reputed to be ties to the connections to the Nazis, earlier on, they are they bought Random House, which used to be owned by the same company that publishes Condé Nast, so Vogue, New Yorker, all of that stuff. So it moved from, there was another publishing house that also was sold to Germany previously. So Germany owns 2 of the 5 American publishers at the same time that the ascendance of a trauma culture after World War II has profoundly shaped like storytelling in the literary fiction space. And there are, so that's just saying like, are people allowed to tell, like, what kind of stories are people allowed to tell? And it's like everything is through the prism of the Holocaust a little bit. I say, as somebody who's Jewish, like, I don't have a problem talking about the Holocaust, but, and like, I totally think Holocaust denial is a really dangerous topic, but like, there isn't like a literary fiction book that's like, here is like, why are my publishers Holocaust deniers or something like that? You couldn't say that. You couldn't do that. So it's there's like cognitive dissonance there. The other, then one of them is owned by like, it's Hachette, it's a French company, and then one of them is News Corp, it's Rupert Murdoch, it's Fox News, it's Donald Trump, it's the Republican Party. So it's like, there's basically Simon and Schuster left, and Simon and Schuster is like, how much can Simon and Schuster do? They can publish a Leaf Stefanik's memoir or something like that. Like, so it's like there is very little autonomy in the U.S. publishing industry at the same time that, like, okay, ISBNs, which are a UK British invention, there are more ISBNs per capita in the United States than but by like factors of, I don't have it in my head right now, like by 14 times or something like that, than in the UK. So this is a like environment of like publishing, writing, reading, and at the same time, like the infrastructure that exists for like kind of distributing, sharing, communicating about what's being written is mass media that is still only responsive to the big five and not self-publishing. So genre fiction, the fact that it's enjoying like a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and success, it's because like, yeah, like I think the big five publishing and the self-publishing titles are like neck and neck in terms of how much they interest readers, because like self-publishing has all of these like very inventive storylines, and you know, they're pulling from like disparate sources, and they're taking risks with you know, identity and love, and like mixing you know, mixing tropes and stuff like that, whereas you know, the big five have like a lot of muscle to elevate certain writers, and so that like that's like a kind of magical environment that is kind of nowhere present in the literary field, because I don't know, like, so I don't know, because there's like this, yeah, I don't want to like make too many more generalizations, but yeah, it's really not that readers are turning away from literary fiction, but that like the values of literary fiction are not really what the publishing industry has the ability to promote, which are like truth telling. That's something that's difficult to do to a publisher. You know, I don't know.
I think I was going to say that is, I think you said it much more eloquently than either of us could, but I think you're exactly right. I think just from the bare bones of what I do know, bones are coming up a lot in this conversation, but you know, bare bones of what I know to be true is that self-publishing offers this freedom that, you know, everyone, I think for the most part, has had or has a dream to one day be published, to be able to just write for the rest of their lives and make a career out of it, or if not, just say that they are published, and that there have been so many new avenues in the last 10-15 years for people to actually make that a reality in the ways that they want to do it, with whatever creativity or means or methods or modes. And I think it's really cool to see, and I think that's why we started the podcast, to just kind of like uplift these voices of people who are like, no, like I tried, and because my book didn't fit in with a certain market, or it wasn't, you know, vampires were in phase and I was writing about fairies, and now fairies are in phase and I'm writing about whatever, that like people have been able to almost like democratize what they're doing in a really cool, unique, individual way, while then creating communities to rally around each other and to help create and to like pool funds together. So yeah, no, that's really fascinating about they have so much of a hold, the big five do, on so much of what gets put on the bookshelves and what we see. But it's interesting because, sorry, this is also a tangent, but, you know, I've seen so many fan fictions get picked up by big five publishers, and then they have to change so much for very obvious reasons. But what we have seen, like the rise in popularity of certain genres and authors on TikTok, then actually translates to in real life shifts in the market. So anyway, I think it's really interesting. We could talk all day about it for sure, but it is really interesting.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, in terms of fan fiction getting picked up by, well, like 50 Shades of Grey is an example of like a fan fiction that got mainstream distribution, and I think that really boosted readership probably for a lot of novels, right, in the fantasy space.
Yeah, that too, and then a couple in the genre, the like same fantasy genre, like Cassandra Clare was writing Harry Potter fan fiction, and then hers got picked up. She did the City of Bone series back in the day, and now she has like multiple. I mean, I think she has like well over a dozen novels in a bunch of different series. Shenlin Yu just got picked up, and she has a new book, Alchemize, that was a Harry Potter fan fiction as well. So it's just really interesting where the. I wonder if what you were saying, like, there's really not much that the literary fiction space can do under the restrictions of what these big five publishers want, but then they see what's popular in these like digital spaces and they're trying to kind of like snatch that away and be able to control it in different ways. I don't know. Maybe.
I don't have a lot to add to this conversation. I've just been listening. So,
Brandon, you've been so quiet this episode.
yeah, no, you were both just going off. So I was, I was enjoying the conversation that was happening.
Yeah, it's okay. Just teasing.
But sorry, I'm trying to find my place on the dock here. Yeah. So,
Okay.
as we kind of get close to the end of our time here, Ash, were there? I know you had one more that you wrote, so I don't want to keep throwing it back to you, but I know you had one more question in there, so I wanted to see if we wanted to tackle that, or do we want to move on to our usual show ender? Because I don't want to do the show ender and then do that question, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. Well, I was so curious if you can, if there is any connection, as you wrote in the form, between games, which I thought was interesting that you included, intimacy and erudition. Can you talk about those themes and what they mean to you?
Yeah. Um, well, yeah. I think that reading and writing are both forms of intimacy that are like ways that are mediated, and um, writing is is an experience of erudition. I think because it's like talking back to other writers. I think I'm a believer, proponent in the theory of intertextuality, that everything that we are, communicating out is a processing of stuff that's been inputted. So, in terms of games, that's really where the um, the the genre of fiction versus literary fiction question is in terms of my work, wherein we find like novels with romantic plots that are called literary fiction and have historically like kind of composited the genre of literary fiction, like from Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights to contemporary serious novels like The Corrections or something like that, where there's plots of, or John Updike really, where there's plots of intimacy, in Richard Yates, plots of intimacy and relationships developing, and not only characters individually. And so I think that like when I talk about like wanting my work to like serve outside of the mediation of the page, that's where intimacy that's where like okay, yeah, I'm trying to basically make video games that are um, that are holographs. So that they would also be animations, but they would be like kind of algorithmically responsive to the people who are watching them or interacting with them. And so I think that the process of like writing in very, very traditional ways that are about communicating directly creates this opportunity or possibility for more more like instantiated versions of that experience in the shape of like holographic animations and games and stuff like that.
So cool. I love what you said about like the intimacy between like writers and, you know, also the intimacy between readers and the writers. I think that's so interesting. Game holographic. Yeah, I'm having a hard time almost picturing what that would look like. So you don't have to go into depth, but I would be curious in the future, especially since you seem to be interested in animation as well, what that looks like for you in the future with any projects that you have. But I also know we are limited on time, so we'll have to wait for next time we have you on. I will let Brandon ask the next question.
Well, yeah, that you'll definitely have to keep us updated on your animation and all of that, because that's definitely something that I have almost no knowledge of. So it'll be really cool to like see the process of that for you and how that goes, and then hopefully the end results as well. But yeah, as Ash said, we like to end the show with everybody with this fun little question. It's a little less serious than some of the topics we were just touching on, so a little bit of a I forgot what word I was going to use there. But I'm sure you've heard if you've listened to our previous episodes. And the question is just if you could read one book again for the first time, forgetting everything you know about it, and just experience it completely fresh, what book would that be? And I think you'll have an answer that we probably haven't heard before, since you brought up some books that we were already unfamiliar with.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I have an answer. It's Andrea Grant's Bleach. I read it for the first time in college, and I reread it recently, and I just want to read it again without knowing what's in it, because I felt like between those two readings how much it impacted me, and so I would like to know. I would like to be able to compare that reading experience, that insight or that recognition, to a new reading of it without kind of knowing anything about it in terms of content.
Yeah,
Why?
and this.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Nope.
And I was just going to ask: is Bleach currently published? I couldn't remember if earlier you said it wasn't or it is. I just want to make sure I'm 100% clear.
It's not published yet.
Okay.
Her book Modern Natives is published. It's available on Amazon. It's a really beautiful combination of like urban folklore and mythology from the Pacific Northwest that has like fairy tales, like sometimes modernized fairy tales, somewhat illustrated with like kind of comic book renderings of her character. And it's like a really beautiful book. And but yeah, I wasn't involved in that publication at all. And so Bleach is a book that found me at a time when I was so well versed in that genre. It's like young woman struggling with, but like also finding herself as an artist. There was do you know Francesca Lia Block? She's a fantasy writer, but also in the literary fiction space. She wrote a lot for young adults, but she has also written for literary magazines. But she was writing I Am a Teenage Fairy, Weetzie Bat. They were
Weetzie
all
Bat. I love Weetzie Bat. Okay, yes. The name eluded me, but I was actually just thinking about Weetzie Bat the other day. I was like, I need to reread that. It's been so long. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. No, I love those books. And so there's Andrea's work doesn't have any like concrete magical realism, though it's so reminiscent of that kind of creating of a surreal landscape in terms of like the emotional depth. And there were also French novels like Marguerite Duras and Francois Sagan from the like 1960s and 70s that had like similar sorts of themes. There was also Lara Bacnar, Memoirs of a Muse or something like that. So I was just really aware of like young woman. Bildungsroman has her like awakening sort of contemporary literature genre, and hers is so much about becoming an artist rather than about like finding a relationship, and at the same time dealing with very difficult like personal themes, like themes of intimacy. So when I reread it, I realized like how much like different trajectories in my life had been impacted by you know, that experience of reading it. So that's really, I guess I just like for a kind of personal or like almost selfish reason would want to be able to read it without knowing what's in it again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah, I was
really
gonna say
cool.
that's the whole point of the question is the selfishness of like, oh, what if I could just reread?
Yeah.
So it's great.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's ever given us like a book that's not publicly available, like something that's currently unpublished. And but yeah, I understand because sometimes you'll read something and you have so much experience with that type of book, and it almost does kind of taint how you look at it to some degree, like you've experienced some of it before. So yeah, I can definitely relate. All right. Well, I think that's all of our questions.
Sweet.
But it's been great having you on, Nika. Thank you so much for all the wonderful insight into literary fiction and your publishing experience. We really appreciate you coming on. Is there? We'd like to ask at the end is if there's anything we didn't touch on or anything you want to share with everybody, kind of listening on YouTube if they didn't catch the live. Any final thoughts you want to send out there?
Not particularly. I'm yeah. I thought this was a really interesting conversation. It was so comprehensive, and yeah, I'm really grateful for like the attention and the perspective. Also, um, I haven't had much of an opportunity to chat with people in the genre space actually, because um, yeah, so yeah, because I've been writing in the like literary fiction world, and so I am very curious to keep following you.
Well, thank you. We're just two nerds who just really like fantasy. But no, this is truly, I'm going to echo what Brandon said. It's been really insightful and so fun to have someone from a very different, not very different, our interests overlap, but to have a unique and kind of more nuanced perspective on the literary space versus the genre space and how you work and all that kind of stuff. So thanks again for coming and chatting. We'll always have you on anytime you want.
That's so nice. Okay, well, yeah, maybe I'll see if Andrea Grant wants to come on or something.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That we would love that. Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, thanks, Ash. Thank you, Nika. And thanks for everybody tuning in either to the live or on YouTube. Nika, this goes up on Fridays, so keep an eye out for it there. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this episode.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Good night.
Ciao.
Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye.